the decoy to me is an integral role in training your dog for protection sports, police, military, anything that you're really doing that has to do with biting.
I developed a bit of a fear. One of my friends was bit in the face by a protection trained dog, and I saw the damage, and it had a psychological impact on me.
When you're teaching a decoy how to take those bites on the upper body, I like to set it up that it's...
Bob Solimini is one of the most accomplished and respected decoys and dog trainers in the United States. As a dog trainer, Bob has developed and handled some of the most successful competition dogs in North America, earning multiple regional, national, and international titles, setting the gold standard in dog sport and training excellence.
There's definitely differences between what I train in ring and in pet dogs, but the techniques that I use are very, very, very similar. Every dog's different, so I can't stick, like, there's no such thing as cookie cutter training. So I do like to start at a very young age, start desensitizing the dogs. And as the dog starts to mature and I start teaching obedience, I'm just teaching a lot of neutrality.
What do you look for in a dog's temperament when considering them for protection dog training?
So for me personally, I always like...
For those new to protection sports, can you explain what a decoy is in the context of dog training and why having a skilled decoy is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So the decoy to me is an integral role in training your dog for protection sports, police, military, anything that you're really doing that has to do with biting. They're going to be a team member, so they're going to teach your dog just as much as you are during obedience and everything else. They can really mess up your dog, and they can really help your dog to excel. So it is really important to have a well-trained, manageable, trainable decoy as well as a trainable dog. One of the things I always, look for when it comes to that is, are they schoolable? Can somebody learn from me? Do they know what they're doing? Are they going to be athletic enough to work with a very athletic dog? So they are a very important team member. They can build a dog's drive. They can build a dog's bite. They can help you with outing issues. The list just goes on and on when it comes to the decoy being part of your team. Obviously, like a lot of protection people and a lot of police, military, they don't like the decoy really being involved in it. They don't have to necessarily correct your dog, but they can help by acting like they're injured more and letting the dog drive in. They can, push back on the dog to make them drive in. There's definitely different things that you can do, not just in the sport world, but also in the realistic police, military protection side. Obviously, in the sports side, we're looking for points. So the decoy is going to be really playing a role as far as helping you to teach the out, getting the dog closer in the guards, getting the dog to help with the escort, all kinds of different things. So the decoy is definitely an integral part of a training team. You can't have a bad dog, a bad decoy, and a bad trainer. All three of them have to be, somewhat good to get ahead.
That's something I noticed, and I found that really interesting. When I first got into protection dog training, I started PSA and IGP. And in PSA, as the decoy, I never helped with the training of the dog. I mean, I would do what they asked. I would catch the dog. I would add the amount of pressure that they would want me to add. And then when I moved back to California, I was looking up different clubs that were nearby, and there was one French ring club that I found. So I went and I started training with them. Bethany Perdome, she's been on my channel a bunch of times. And it was a massive shift. I was surprised at how much the decoy did within the training and teaching the dog how to perform. The decoy played such a big role that I also felt like now as a decoy, there was more pressure on me to perform well. What about someone who's new, getting into protection dog training, getting into the bite suit for the first time? What is something that a new decoy could look for in an instructor like yourself? Like, if I'm trying to work with a club, how do I know that the advice that the head decoy at that club is good advice and it's going to help me be a better decoy? Are there any things that someone could look for?
Yeah, I would definitely say there is. Some of the things that I would look for is, what is the success level of the people that you're working with? There are a lot of people that are successful in different dog sports, but they're not the ones actually doing the training. They can't problem solve on their own. It is kind of a clicky thing where, and I don't mean clicky like groups of clicks. I mean more of like, are you going to click and jive with this person?
Right.
Because obviously, just like making friends with anybody and even club members in general, personality is going to conflict? Do you get along with these people? Like for me personally, I want somebody that I train with in my club that I want to hang out with. So it's not just about training their dog. It's like, what are we doing Friday night? You know, like let's hang out, let's do something. So we're really a team, you know. And if you know, like I know you were Marine. I don't, you know, I don't know what your MLS was, but you know, whoever you're working with, you guys got to be a team, or you're just not going to jive. And it doesn't matter what it is. People that you work with, it could be, you know, sports, football, baseball. Your team is your team, and that's how I kind of look at ring sport, especially. So when a decoy is trying to find somebody to learn from, one, they should be experienced. They should have trained decoys. They should have been a decoy. And then were they a successful decoy? You know, lots of people throw on the bite suit, take some bites from dogs. Some of them even become level 1 decoys in ring sport or a decoy in PSA. Doesn't really make them a decoy, not in my opinion. So, and then it depends on what you're looking for. Are you looking for somebody to teach you how to be a trial decoy, a training decoy, both? There's so many different little integral parts of decoying and learning decoying. You really want to have somebody that's really well rounded so that you can learn all aspects of decoying. And to me, that's the best bet, is to look for somebody that's well rounded, you know, and also they can get along with, and you know, they're not going to be, you know, riding you like like a Marine drill instructor would, you know.
And you notice two different types of decoys. What are those two different types? And can you break down the differences between the two?
Like as far as a training decoy and a trial decoy. So a
Yes.
trial decoy, if you're just looking to be a trial decoy, you're really looking for somebody to teach you how to break down somebody's training so that you can steal points during the competition within the rules. So can I make this dog not bite me? Can I make this dog not want to out off of me? Can I get meters from this dog? There's different things that you're going to look for in different aspects of different exercises. And really, for a trial decoy, it's going to be dismantling somebody's training. If you're going to be a training decoy, obviously you're looking to build the dog, make the dog better, make it so the decoy can't take points from your dog. I want to be able to teach a dog that when a decoy does something, the dog's like, I've seen this a million times. This is easy. This is what I'm going to do here in this situation. So, and a lot of it just becomes muscle memory because you've shown it so many times as a training decoy. For me personally, and this is how I kind of came up through it, is I was a training decoy, and I learned how to train all the different exercises, not just in ring, but in protection and police and all those different types of bite type of scenario stuff. So I learned how to build those dogs. So then when I became a trial decoy, it was really easy for me to process things and be like, okay, this is what they did here, and I'm going to, you know, disfigure that whole thing now. I'm going to just take it apart. So, you know, if you want to be both, to me, that's the best way to be, as a training decoy and a trial decoy. There's lots of trial decoys. There's lots of training decoys. Not to say that either one of those is bad, because the world needs them all. But for me personally, especially if you want to be a trial decoy, I think a training decoy fits that mold a lot better. You also have to be in really good shape, and, you know, you're going to be working, you know, your ass off.
Yeah, and you said that you started as a training decoy and then became a trial decoy, and you said that was a good process. Does it work just as well the other way?
Um, it can. It's going to be more difficult because you're going to be so used to like really putting it to a dog and trying to like take the dog apart. Where it's like you almost learn how to build the dog. It's easier to recognize how to take them apart when you've helped build a dog. So it can be
Yeah.
both. And I've also seen training decoys go into training mode when they're in the middle of a trial. So like they mess up a dog, like say make them come off of a bite, and then they're like, oh man, I don't want to mess up the dog, and they give them a bite. And it's like, no, your job is to take the dog off the bite. Period. Like let them go. You know, run them back to the car. You know?
And would you say that every decoy is a dog trainer first before they become a decoy? Or have you met people that are like, I'm just really interested in protection sport. I don't know too much about obedience, but the thought of getting in a bite suit sounds very exciting. It matches my personality. Do you run into those, or is it pretty much dog trainers are the ones that become the decoys?
Yeah, no, in the past, I've had plenty of people that were decoys, and that's just what they wanted to do. You know, some of them were having like a factory job. This is when I lived in Boston. Some of them were cops, but they weren't on canine and they wanted to get on canine. So that experience might have helped them out with their job. You know, I've had people that were, you know, all different, you know, career paths that wanted to just get into decoying. And then I've always obviously had the people that are professional dog trainers that want to get into it to advance themselves as either training the decoy, training dogs through the decoying, or to become a trial decoy. Yeah, definitely a
Okay.
mix of both.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought it would be mostly dog trainers, but I was curious about that because I feel like it would be easier for a dog trainer to make the transition right into a training decoy instead of someone who doesn't have any experience. Going right for the trial might be easier because then they're learning just how to get out of the way, how to take points, as you said. And what did you mean by take points for those that aren't familiar with French ring? Because that was a big change for me when I was learning PSA as opposed to French ring when I made that transition.
Yeah, I've only gone to one PSA competition in my life, and I seen that like basically if your dog doesn't do the performance, like that's it, you're done. Where in French ring, it's not like that. You basically start off with full points, and you start losing points during the jumps, the obedience, and the protection part for many different things. Even the handler can lose points. But the decoy's job is to dismantle your training, to take points, and he's the assistant of the judge. So if the dog is slow to bite, you're going to lose points. So many points per second, different exercises for not biting or not defending the handler. Slow to out depends on the distance. Like the defensive handler is more expensive because you're closer to your dog, where the revolver attack or the face attack, you're further away, so it's less points to lose per second. So your job is to make those happen, to make the dog not want to let go of the bite, to make the dog not want to bite you, to get meters. If it's an escort, the dog's escorting you while you're walking down the field, and if you can take off and the dog doesn't bite you, within 1 meter, 3 meters, 10 meters, you're just taking more and more points. So that's what I mean about dismantling, somebody's training is, did they show you this in training? No. Well, I'm going to exploit it and take off,
Mm.
or hold the barrage, whatever it is. The barrage is with the bamboo and holding it in front of the dog to create a barrier and not let them into the bite. Some dogs will have a stick issue; they won't come through it. We definitely cover that in a lot of my seminars and videos on sit, stay, learn too.
So then it's very much dependent on, so like if there's a trial, the scores that the dogs get is often very much dependent on the skill of the decoy as far as taking away points. So does that mean sometimes it's hard to tell if one dog is better than another dog just based on their scores from trials if you don't know what decoy was decoying the trial? Like, does it have a massive impact on those scores?
Yeah, it can for sure have a massive impact. It's one of the things that I've kind of complained about when it comes to decoying is
Mm.
it's luck of the draw. So like if you show up at a trial and the decoy is working your dog because he knows Nate's dog bites really hard, so I'm going to work his dog harder and then goes easy on the next dog, and the dog he goes easy on beats you. Those
Mm.
points could help you get into the championship, and the other person doesn't deserve it. So it's definitely something where you want to kind of create. It's really hard because you have to have some honor in being a decoy of an even playing field. You have to do not the same work, but the same level of work for every dog. So I can't go extra hard on your dog because you didn't buy me a beer last night, and then but your cousin bought me 3 shots, and I'm gonna take it easy. You can't do stuff like that. And I also can't see a dog coming 100 miles an hour down the field, and then this dog is jogging down the field, so I go extra hard on one dog and less on the other, because then you have dogs that are champions that don't deserve to be there, and somebody that should have been a champion, they're not on the podium. So it's
That
it's
has to
definitely
be,
dependent on that decoy for sure.
and that has to be very challenging, I think, as a decoy, especially if it's a long trial. In the morning, if you're nice and fresh and you have more energy, by the time the last dog is going, even if you're trying to be as consistent as possible, there still might be some discrepancies. Have you noticed that at all, depending on where you are in the sequence of dogs? Does that have an impact on the intensity of the decoy, or the decoys that you've worked with, they're pretty consistent throughout with maybe minor discrepancies?
Yeah, most of the decoys that I've worked with have been pretty good in that manner. I always tell people, like, to be a decoy, you should be in good shape, because if you're going to be out there for 2 or 3 days working dogs, you could work 30, 40 dogs depending on the size of the competition. you got to be in shape to do that. So you can't be gassing out at the end of it. So like nutrition and exercise is really an integral part of being a decoy as well. And you're only going to be as good as your body allows you. So it's really important to stay in shape. Um, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that can be really frustrating is like I said, it's kind of luck of the draw. And all of a sudden you get a decoy, and, oh God, I don't know. Like, this is either going to be horrible or I'm going to kick everyone's ass here. Or
All
you
right.
see somebody else at a trial and you're like, oh man, that dog's going to be the next champion and really doesn't deserve it, and it's just one of those things. So, but I mean, for the most part, most of the people that I work with have, they just they want to be good and right.
Yeah, when I was training with the club that I was training with down in Southern California, I was never certified as a decoy in French ring. I wanted to be certified, but I developed a bit of a fear. I became intimidated because one of my friends was bit in the face by a protection trained dog. And I saw the damage, and it had a psychological impact on me. Like when dogs would do bark and hold, they'd jump and bark in my face. That made me really anxious. Or working with like teaching the dog to, let's say, target the chest, so it's harder to esquive and lose points. That was really rough. I'd hesitate and flinch and move back. Are there any certain, like, did you ever struggle at all with being possibly intimidated at all, or anxious or nervous at all, and you just kind of plowed through it? Is there techniques for that, or was it pretty much like you never had that fear or had to deal with that at all?
For me personally, I remember doing that the very first time I was, young, I was a teenager basically. And I remember the guy I was working with was like, all right, when the dog comes in, you're going to bend over and the dog's going to bite you right on the top of the shoulder. And I'm thinking, you've got to be shitting me. This dog's going to grab my face like it's the most forward thing. I'm going to get, and then I'm like, well, listen, I don't have a modeling career, so screw it. Let's do it. And I just did it. And after that first one, the dog did it, bit me right where he was supposed to. And it was close to my neck. It kind of gave me a rush. Like things just kind of took off from there. And I'm like, man, this is awesome. And then, so I never really, I had like doubts in the beginning, but not really a fear. And that goes to a little bit of my mentality growing up as a kid. Like I had fear is kind of beaten out of me. So I don't really have that. And but yeah, I mean, for me, again, that goes to like who are you working with? Like for me personally, and have I had decoys get bit in the face? Absolutely. And multiple times, but it happens. It's part of it. You know what I mean? So it's gonna happen at some point. You're gonna get bit in the hand, bit in the foot, bit in the face. It's a very likely thing. But to try to minimize that as much as possible. I've been bit in the face myself. But when you're teaching a decoy how to take those bites on the upper body and really close to their neck and collar, I like to set it up that it's not like run down the end of the field. I'm going to send the dog. You're going to catch him here. That's just idiotic. So we try to set it up with either a back tie, a bungee, a barrel that the dog has to go over so you can target the dog where they're supposed to be. Normally I'll start more on the outside and then start working my way in with the dog so that, again, the decoy's comfort level, because you make mistakes when you're not confident, and that's how accidents are going to happen. Somebody's going to get bit really bad, and the dog's not going to care. They're going to bite. Like that's their job, is to bite you.
Have you worked with any decoys that were nervous and you were able to help them get through it, or sometimes that might be too much to where it's like you might not be cut out for this?
Yeah, I think I've had a couple of guys that they were kind of nervous, and some of them I probably told you're just not going to be cut out for this, and some of them were able to overcome it. And again, backing way up, slowing down, placing the dog on a place that they may not be comfortable with, let them kind of understand. And I also like to work a dog that's very social, so not some high drive dog that's going to come off the bite and tag you and rip your ear off. That's just not good for teaching. It's the people are going to be more hesitant, not want to deal with that if the dog pops off and snaps in their face. So a good clear-headed dog for somebody to learn on is also very important. But definitely had people that oh man, this is nerve-wracking, or even when they have to stick their hand out in front of a dog, or I'm telling somebody like on the basket exercise to put their hands on the top of the dog's head, and you can kind of see like their butt pucker up a little bit, like, come on, are you kidding me? And I'm like, dude, I'll show you. And I'll show them. And the dog's stable enough that, because they've seen it, I've trained them to see it. And it's not such a big deal. And then they're more comfortable doing it. Obviously,
That
you
makes
watch
sense.
out with people's dogs that you don't know.
Right. And as someone who's even served as a director of decoys for national ring sport organization, what do you believe are some of the key qualities and skills that make a great decoy? In other words, what should handlers look for in a decoy, and what should aspiring decoys work on developing in themselves?
I would say one of the biggest things is to leave your ego at the door. So like if you go out there with an ego, like I'm the best decoy out here, somebody's going to prove you wrong really quickly. There's always going to be somebody better than you. So even now, I'm 52 years old. I still try to learn things. You know, there might be some 18-year-old decoy that can show me something. I'm like, man, I never thought of that. That's awesome. So like, you got to be open-minded. You got to be coachable. Again, if you're going to get in the bite suit, you can't be 80 pounds overweight. You know, it's a very physical thing, you know, and God forbid, if you're 300 pounds and you fall on a dog, you could injure the dog. The whole thing is to help the dog, teach the dog, not injure the dog. So ego is definitely something that, obviously you're going to have some level of an ego, but you don't let it cloud your training or cloud your teachability, you know, so you got to be coachable.
Yeah, definitely. And uh, thinking about competition obedience, protection sports, something I noticed too when I made the switch from some of the other sports, specifically, I'm talking about IGP now. When I don't know if the rules has changed. I did a BH in IGP. I didn't do anything beyond that. But when I was learning about IGP, the dogs were able to wear fur saver during trial. I don't know if that's still the case. And some of the people that I trained with, they would encourage trying to teach the dog that the fur saver was the remote collar or the shock collar to try to get the dog to believe that. So they would put the shock collar on, they would have it on, they wouldn't use it at all. And then they would take it off and they would do that for a while. And then when they were ready to use it the first time, they would take the fur saver, they would make a big deal, they would put it on, and then they would start using the remote collar, take it off. And the idea was to get the dog to believe that the correction was coming from the fur saver. So then when they're going out for a trial, they take the fur saver. You can correct me, so I better listen and follow through. And they don't have that in French ring. The dog goes out completely naked. Now, one thing I did notice was you're able to wear your training vest. How much of an influence do you think that has on the dog to maintain the reliability, even though they're not able to give the dog any rewards throughout? Does it have any impact? And then the other question I have is, how do you manage to get these dogs to perform at the highest level with all these distractions within the environment? There's something I talk about with my students. I call it an environmental difficulty assessment. And I do a scale of 0 to 5. So 0 is completely neutral. That's training your dog at home. There's no distractions. But as it becomes more difficult, more distractions, more things pulling our dog's focus away from us, that would be like a level 5. And French ring is a level 5, I would say, for most dogs. And you're able to get these dogs to perform so well for a very long time, too. I think the top level, it could be what, 45 minutes? They're out on the field. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you've taken a lot of the things that you've been able to do at this highest level and you apply it to pet dogs and clients that you're working with to get that reliability so they can take their dogs wherever and have that freedom without having to worry that their dog's going to be reactive or their dog's not going to listen and they're not going to be compliant. They have that well-trained dog. How do you I know this is a really long question. How do you develop that reliability? What are the steps that you take? Is it something that you change and adjust for each dog, or do you have a system that you follow?
Yeah, I think I definitely have a system that I follow, but you know, it's kind of on shaky ground because every dog's different. So I can't stick like there's no such thing as cookie cutter training. I mean, there's certain things that I stick to, and then you know, some of those things like let's go down a different route. You know, so it's nice to have a lot of tools in your toolbox and not just you know trying to bang in a nail with a screwdriver. It's just not going to work. Um, so I do like to start at a very young age, and I immediately start, you know, between 6 and 8 weeks, start desensitizing the dogs. A lot of the times I'll do it in drive, whether it's food drive or during like a bite with a tug or a rag, whatever, you know, whatever age the dog is, getting them to like literally go over different surfaces, over different loud noises. I'll make loud noises, either cracking a whip, shaking a stick, firing off a starter pistol, having people slam things together, you know, having a baby pool full of either loud plastic bottles or, you know, whatever, just a bunch of different bubble wrap, whatever is going to make a lot of noise. and having the dogs go through that either for food or for a tug. So I'm just desensitizing them. And as the dog starts to mature and I start teaching obedience, I'm just teaching a lot of neutrality. So it's like, ignore that, focus on me, then you'll get a reward. Focus on me a lot longer, then you get a reward. Focus on me for 20 minutes, then you'll get a reward. So I just keep prolonging it more and more until I can go out and train for an hour and a half. The dog doesn't get a reward because there's no rewarding in a trial. There's also no corrections, but that's a process to get through because your dog's naked and then you can't have any type of reward on you, whether it's a ball, a tug, a food, whatever. And then when, like you were saying, with the trial vest, when it comes to ring dogs, maybe the trial vest can kind of key up of like, hey, we're working. I don't really use cues with my dogs at all. I would say the only real cue I ever use is for downfield attacks, they're in a down. For a non-downfield attack, they're in a sit. Other than that, and I've even changed that on some dogs. I've had every dog in a sit. Kind of depends, like I said, on the dog, what route I go down. But I don't really do a lot of like marker training of like, this is going to be this exercise so that you can do that. So I'm not cueing the dog on what we're about to do, like you were saying with the fur saver and things like that. I do use remote collar on every dog, and basically the same thing. I just teach neutrality. They come out of the crate, it goes on automatically, it doesn't come off till we go back in a crate. So the collar is just a collar they wear all the time, and somehow magically corrections happen when they don't, follow commands or they do things that they're not supposed to. And I just found that that's going to be the best reliability in all situations with the dogs.
And the corrections, when you start adding those into the training. So if we think about, I always like to think about the two main issues that most average pet owners have, which is if we're thinking about obedience issues, a dog not doing something they want the dog to do, and then behavioral issues, that's going to be things the dog is doing that perhaps they don't want the dog to do, digging, getting into the trash. So if we think about obedience, a dog not listening to something or a dog breaking a stay, do you have a certain process that, okay, before we start adding corrections for non-compliancy to a command, I want to see X, Y, and Z from the dog before we start doing that? Or same thing with breaking a stay. Or if we're looking at behavioral issues, let's say the dog is jumping up on the sofa. Do we go right to a correction, or is there a process where you'd like to teach the dog first, hey, don't go up on there. Once we're at a certain point, then we add those corrections for reliability?
Sure. So, I mean, this may be controversial. Obviously, everyone has their own opinions on how to train the
Yeah.
dog. For me personally, I go right into it. So, if it's, say, jumping on the counters or jumping on the couch, I don't immediately put a remote collar on and just start correcting them. I do go through
Right.
obedience before I start teaching that. I want the dog to understand the markers of a remote collar and the praise that I'm going to give them. So, like right versus wrong, or how to shut the pressure off. But once I'm into the obedience, even if it's lesson one, I even tell clients on lesson one, when you go home, you can start working on the counter surfing right now. So basically, the dog jumps on the counter, they start feeling the stim from the remote collar, they come off the counter, it shuts off immediately, and they learn negative on the countertop, positive when I come off, and it's just very quick. I don't believe, me personally, I don't believe in like getting to a process of like, now we're going to introduce the remote collar. And it's like, for me, I look at it as a tool. And I know for a fact that carpenters don't start building a house with a hammer and then switch over to a nail gun. They start with a nail gun. So that's kind of how I kind of look at it with training dogs, is why do something that I'm just going to have to undo later or tweak to make it better? I just jump right into it.
And is there much of a difference between how you're working with a dog that's going to be training for competition, obedience, protection, sport, working dogs, as opposed to your pet dog?
Yeah, definitely, because the reward system is a little bit different because they're going to run downfield and bite somebody. So, like typically, when I start a
Right.
young dog, I don't really do a lot of corrections. I just want the dog to grow and grow and grow and think that he's an unstoppable alpha dog, and he's the best dog that there is. So I don't do a lot of corrections for outing. It's going to be basically come off of a leg sleeve or a tug for another tug and just teaching them that kind of route. I would say the more obedience starts to come in once the dog understands because I teach technique right away. Once they're starting to understand technique, they're outing on a command and then getting a rebite, or they're recalling back to the handler on a whistle. verbal, whatever you're doing. Then I start working on the line of departure where the dog has to sit and maintain that sit or down until the decoy agitates, runs downfield, and then they're released. So that's where the obedience starts to come in. As soon as they start to move, they're getting stemmed and popped with the leash. Once they're calm, they're released to go bite. So that's the reward system, is now you can bite.
Mhm.
And then at first it might be 2 seconds, then 5 seconds, then 10 seconds. And then I start throwing in other things like saying the dog's name, saying see instead of attack, and then just
Yeah.
messing with the dog's head so that they start listening to me instead of
Yeah.
waiting for some response that releases them for a bite. There's definitely differences between what I train in ring and in pet dogs. But the techniques that I use are very, very, very similar. It's just obviously you're looking for absolute perfection to be on a podium as opposed to
Mhm.
not getting run over by a car, which both for me can be tragic, not being on the podium or having your dog run over. They're pretty equal in my book.
Yeah, and with obedience being involved, what you were talking about made me start to wonder a little bit about the start of protection work. I've worked with different clubs where they'll incorporate obedience right away with the protection. And then I've worked with other clubs where they say, no, we're not doing any obedience. We just want to get the dog out and show them how to bite, where to bite, get them interested in the game. What's your approach when you're bringing a brand new dog out? Is there a moment where you're trying to feel the dog out? Is it interested in the tug? Is it interested in the rag? What's the process for that?
Yeah, so I definitely, it depends on the dog for sure, but typically I do go the route of this is bite work. We're going to develop the dog, develop his grip, develop his drive. Not going to worry about obedience right now. And then at the same time, start working obedience at a different time, a different day, same field if you can. If you can't, then whatever. But
Mm.
start that obedience at the same time I'm starting the bite work. But I don't mesh the two together immediately. Sometimes, and I've had dogs, I actually made kind of a funny video about it years ago and it almost went viral. About I had a young female Malinois that just would not let go of the bite. You couldn't do anything. She would not come off. Well, if obviously a dog like that, I am going to start introducing some corrections, either popping the leash or stimming her with the remote so that she learns that once you come off the bite, I'm going to give you another one. So there is going to be a reward system, but without a correction, she just wasn't letting go. So it's like different situations, different dogs, but typically I try not to involve obedience. And I'm talking like 8 to 12 weeks of age of a puppy, when they're really young and just developing. That's when I'm doing this stuff. Is really the bite is going to be separate than the obedience.
Are they coming out on an agitation collar or harness? Do you prefer one over the other?
Kind of depends on what we're doing, and then that also depends on the dog. Some dogs I do like an agitation collar. I feel like that pulling on their neck can definitely incite some aggression to like I'm going to lose this thing. And then some dogs
Mm.
can't breathe no matter what you do with an agitation collar. So a good, well-fitting harness is better for them. And I've had it both ways on many dogs.
Okay, very situational then. That makes perfect
Yeah.
sense. And when you're working with someone and they have a new dog, do you prefer if so like if I come to you with my puppy, it's our first day, are you going to have me hold the puppy on a leash and you're going to come up and work, or are we going to put the puppy on a back tie?
So it depends on the person, but yeah, typically I have you just hold the dog, depending on the age of the dog. I mean, if somebody comes to me and they have a 5-year-old 100-pound German Shepherd, it's getting back time. I don't trust anybody to
Mm.
hold their dog back if
Yeah.
it's showing that it's going to bite. So definitely a back tie there. If it's a young puppy, I mean, if they let the dog go, what's going to happen? It's going to rip my jeans. So
Right.
that one I'm not so much worried about, but definitely I try to get them involved right away so they know how to handle their dog. I mean, that's what's great about my wife being so successful in a ring too, is I can always have her kind of stand behind the handler and coach them
Mm.
while I'm working the puppy. And I'm not trying to talk while I'm working at the same time and losing because I'm old. I lose my breath. So
And how long is an initial assessment? Is it just a few minutes? You're kind of feeling them out, trying to get a bite, maybe a rebite. Of course, depending on the dog. I'm sure if the dog's a little less confident, maybe it's growling a little bit more. You're not going to be pulling back on it. Are you also trying to determine the play style of the dog? Like, is this a dog that likes the fight? High drive Malinois. And I know saying high drive is very generalized, but you know what I'm talking about, as opposed to maybe a German Shepherd that would rather take the toy and go run off?
Yeah, it's definitely, every dog is different and every breed is a little bit different. So I don't really judge by the breed or by each dog. It's just, I'm going to do these
Right.
different things. I'm going to test the prey drive, a little bit of fight drive, confidence of the dog. Can it handle the stick right away? Because I start the stick right away. And I'm not like waving it around the dog. I'll strike the dog, obviously, with an 8-week-old puppy gently, but I want them to
Right.
feel the pressure of it hitting their back and hear that clatter noise when it does it. So I don't hold off on any of that stuff. Um, like I said, I like to get them environmentally sound too. So they're coming through tunnels to bite, and if they're showing nervousness, then I have to build their drive a little bit more. So they're more willing to do those things and overcome their fear. So I'm kind of like assessing the dog with prey drive, fight drive, like even their energy level. I've had dogs where they're literally just kind of napping at the end of the leash while I'm running around with a rag and I'm almost dying. And then in like 3 minutes, all of a sudden the dog wakes up and starts working. If I had given up in 1 minute or 2 minutes, I might have washed out a dog that potentially could have done pretty good. So I'll definitely have them come out a couple of times in one meeting. Some of them could be 2 minutes, some of them could be 5 minutes. It just depends on each dog, but there's definitely things that I'm looking for. And if the dog doesn't hit that marker, I'll either tell them to come back in a month or two, or this dog's just not going to do it.
And so you introduce the clatter stick right away. Do you introduce anything else? Do you do the bottle curtains or any other sort of tools, even if that's not part of the sport that the dog's going to be competing in, to build up the confidence more?
Yeah, for sure. With a young dog, I like to have a junkyard in the training field of just all kinds of crap, and it's, yeah, it can be a pain. My wife usually gets pissed because I'm saving every box from Amazon and every empty bottle that we're going through and bringing them out there. And but it helps the dog. Yeah, so definitely not just the stick. I'm using the stick with like a bottle curtain or hula hoops with ribbons on it, or a bunch of cardboard boxes with bubble wrap and other junk just all thrown in there, so the dog kind of weaves through it. And they don't care about environmental stress at all. It's, I want that bite. It helps to build their drive. It helps to build their confidence. I kind of do a lot of multitasking with dogs. I do a lot of
I love that you said,
multitasking, just training ring in general. Like today, we were working my wife's new 7-month-old puppy, and from a face attack, I taught it the escort, and from the escort, I taught it the defensive handler. So like it was all within one quick session of teaching from a face, escort into a defense, and then it's just an easy way for me to do things. Even when I'm playing ball with a dog, I go from playing ball to teaching to retrieve. And I like to kind of multitask those different things so that the dogs just kind of get a better comprehension of like what is going on in this exercise.
and can you take just a quick moment to explain some of the exercises? Like, I know what you're talking about when you say face attack, but someone who's not familiar with French ring may not know what you're talking about.
Sure. So the face attack isn't them attacking your face. It means that you're facing the dog and challenging the dog. So the face attack is typically between 30 and 50 meters. The dog has to maintain a line of departure. Basically, it can't cross the line or you start losing points if it does. It can't break the line and run downfield and bite without the command of the handler. Upon arrival, after the judge authorizes with the horn, you send your dog. So upon arrival, the decoy is now challenging your dog according to different levels, brevet through ring 3, which is the higher level.
Like teasing them, kind of trying to get them to break the stay.
Yeah, either that or even the level of work on the entry. So as the
Okay.
dog's coming in, like on the brevet, the entry level, like you take a quick swipe when the dog's like 10 to 15 meters away, shoving the stick down in front of them, but they're so far away, they don't see it. And then you open up for the dog to bite. And then in ring 1, you can start doing a small esquive, making the dog miss the bite, and then allow them to bite. Ring 2, you can make the dog miss, hold them off the bite for a second or two, then let them bite. And ring 3, I always tell people, ring 3 is there's no surrender. If you can get the dog not to bite, don't let him bite. It's ring 3.
Mhm.
It's big boy league now. So yeah, so I lost track of what we were talking about. Where were we going?
That's
I was explaining the face attack. Yeah. So
that's right.
yeah. So once you challenge the dog, and the dog does grab a hold of you, depending on the exercise, you get 10 to 15 seconds. I'm not a judge, so I don't really care about the points as much. I always go for perfection. The dog has to stay on the bite wherever they bit for the entire time. If they switch grips, you lose points. If they pop off the bite and the decoy can hold them off the bite, you lose points. Once the judge authorizes with the horn and you're recalling your dog, they have to immediately let go or you lose points. They have to come within a meter of you and be, not moving anymore, or else you lose points. I mean, you lose points on everything. If you stand the wrong way, if you take the whistle out of your mouth at the wrong time, I mean, you can literally
Oh
lose
my gosh.
points all day long. It's very, very critical on everything. But that's the face attack. The defensive handler is you walk your dog up in a heel position, you shake hands with the decoy. The dog has to stay not neutral, but they can't be biting. So they can bark and act aggressive. Then the judge will authorize the decoy to leave. The decoy goes 5 steps behind the handler. They keep walking forward. Typically, the dog will turn around and walk backwards. It's one of the exercises that a lot of people like to see. And the dog's walking backwards and they come up and assault the handler. It has to be an audible hit. Once they hit the handler, the dog bites immediately. If they're slow to bite, it's slow to defend, you lose points. If the dog bites early, you could lose points. You could lose the whole exercise depending on where they bit early, not where on your body, but before the handshake or after the handshake. There's so many points to lose on there. So that's the defensive handler that they have to let go and guard on command.
And I want to ask about I had it in my head and then I just forgot what it's called. The basket one where they have to
Object guard?
object guard. Thank you.
Yep.
With the object guard, when I first started learning about the sport and the club I was training with, I said, wouldn't it work if we just showed the dog that the decoy has to grab the basket, then you command the dog to bite? And you do that over and over and over again. Decoy comes in, does a bunch of stuff, dances around, whatever, grabs the basket, tell the dog to bite. And do it as many times as it takes. So anytime the decoy grabs the basket, that's the cue for the dog to bite. And I don't remember exactly what they said, but they said it's a little bit more complicated than that. You can't just do that and it's going to work out as well as you might think because of all these other variables. What are some of those variables that play a part in that training? Because that is a very complicated one, is it not?
Yeah, in my opinion, the basket can be one of the most complicated exercises in all of ring sport because the dog's working completely on their own. They have one command from the handler to guard the basket, and then the handler is 20 meters away behind a blind, and they can't see or say anything to the dog. So the dog's completely working on their own. The decoy has 3 attempts to go in and steal the basket. You have 5 minutes to steal the basket and then 2 minutes per try. So it's 2, 2, and 1 because it's 5 minutes. So if you took 2 minutes on each one, the last one's only 1. Most people don't make it more than 15 seconds because everyone's in a rush, which is one of the things I try to teach decoys. Calm down, slow down. You have 2 minutes. You've been in there for 10 seconds and you're already at the dog. So they have circles around the basket. It makes sense, but the dogs usually move the basket. The decoy moves the basket. It ends up moving around, and it's really just a judgment of how far away the decoy is from the basket when they bite. The rings are 1.5 meter, 2 meter, 3, and 5 meters. And then the decoy makes his way in, and he can't back up at all. So if he's within 3 meters, he has to stay at that 3 meter mark, and he can go around the dog the whole time. And for me, I like the dog to bite at about 1 meter. So when they're within arm's reach, I want the dog biting them. I don't want them to touch the basket because if they did, like you were saying, if they pulled the basket, stole it, and the dog bit, you get some 120-pound decoy from France. He's going to rip that basket and be 10 meters before your dog even processes that he took the basket. So I don't even want that to happen. As soon as he's within reach, he's getting bit. And then they can only bite for 5 seconds. They have to let go on their own and go back to guard the basket. So no cueing from the handler because they're behind a blind. So it's a very complicated exercise. It's one of my favorites because most decoys in the US don't know how to work it or train it. And most trainers don't know how to train it. So it's one of the most complicated exercises in the ring, especially here in the US. It's one of my favorites.
I just thought of something. I don't know if anyone's done this before, but let me know what you think. What if you created let's say an elevated platform, but a relatively short one, about the size of the inner circle. And you got the basket and you put the dog on there. And then you teach the dog you can bite once you can bite the decoy, but you cannot come off the platform. And then do that a bunch of times so the dog has that very clear black and white boundary, like, oh, I can't step off of this. Because I don't know if the dogs can see those lines or if they're paying attention to it. And what I've seen when I just being a spectator of the sport, there's times where the dog breaks early. That's part of it, right? Trying to get the dog to make the mistake. The decoys trying to trick the dog. I've seen decoys do different movements that might make the dog think that they made a mistake, as if the decoy was going to correct them. Has that been a technique anyone has used? And if not, do you think that would be effective? Does it sound like it would be?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. There's so many variables to this exercise. So I have seen people mark it with like a pipe that's like in the ground, like stapled to the ground, basically, like at the say 1.5 or 2 meter mark. And then they take the I mean, the basket's a pretty good sized basket. I don't.
Right.
There is dimensions in the rule books. I don't know what it is. I did at one point in my life, but they nail with a huge nail the basket into the ground. Again, like I said on something earlier, I don't like doing things that I have to then undo. So the basket is never going to be immobile. It's always going to move. So my
Mm,
fear would be if the dog sees the line, which also the basket can move out of the line at any point because it's a loose basket. Now the line is irrelevant. It could be the 5 meter line or completely just gonzo. I've even seen on windy days, like when the dog went to bite the decoy, the basket gets blown away, and then the dog has to run to that basket, and now it's nowhere near the circles. So, like, those
right.
are the variables that I'm talking about. Even kicking off the basket to go bite the decoy, he could have kicked it 3 meters back, and he still has to go to it. So, those
Yeah.
are the things that I kind of think about. Like, it's just not practical, in my opinion.
Yeah, that is interesting though. I always enjoyed watching that part of the sport. When I start off working or training a young puppy, at least the foundation that I was taught was we did a lot of what was called drive building. And so, what the drive building was from the people that I first learned from, we would take the dog, young puppy, even, we put him on a back tie up against a wall. And it was a pretty short back tie. It wasn't very long, maybe 2, 3 feet. And we would tease the dog with the toys. And often we would have multiple dogs if we had more dogs to work. So we'd have 4 or 5 dogs. One person's coming out teasing all the dogs. One dog's barking more than the other. We come and we reward that dog, maybe turn away to remove some of the pressure, get the dog to rebite. And a lot of times when there's puppies, after they would get a full bite, we'd pull to make sure the dog's keeping a tight grip. Then we'd have the handler come in and do some cradling to get the dog comfortable holding the rag or whatever it is that we're using in their mouth. Is that a technique that you often use as well?
Typically, I only use that technique with I call it a puppy circle. Is when I have one puppy or multiple puppies that have lower drive because they'll feed off of each other. Like, hey, that
Right.
one barking and lunging and trying to get that tug. I want it too. So I kind of use that mentality to get a dog with lower drive to kind of get more interested in it. I've even brought out adult dogs that are very vocal and that'll still act like a puppy. Like one of my wife's Dutchies, he's 11 and he still acts like he's 6 months old. He'll hit the end of the leash and he'll be barking and she's holding him back. And it's great for some puppies to see. Some puppies get nervous about it and they want to get the hell out of there. So it
Mm,
depends on the dog, but I definitely use those techniques. I try not to do a puppy circle because I want them to have that natural drive. If the dog doesn't have that natural drive, I just feel like that it's probably not the right dog for the sport or whatever you're getting into. If you get a dog that, depending on where you live in the country, like here in Arizona, and I grew up in Boston. So in Boston, if it's freezing out and you have a dog in it, a police dog in a heated vehicle, they're going to be like, you're on your own, dude. I'm not coming out there. It's freezing. And then here in Arizona, it's
mm.
110 degrees. And if they're in an air conditioned car, then they're going to be like, oh, I need to go out there and save my partner. Like I'm going to be sweating my ass off. I'm not doing it. So I want my dog
Right.
to have enough drive, that natural drive that they're willing to do, run through fire to do whatever it is that I'm asking them to do.
Do you think that could help build the drive though with a younger puppy? Because we had all kinds of different puppies. I mean, they were usually some kind of working breed. lots of Malinois, but we'd have some Dutch Shepherds as well. And occasionally we might have a Golden Retriever or a Border Collie or an Australian Shepherd. And those dogs might sit there at first, like you were saying, where they're not barking, they're not getting into it. But once they saw the other dogs starting to get into it, they started to behave in the same way. And we kept doing that for the entire imprinting. We do 1 to 3 of those drive building sessions every single day. And we would see more drive coming from the Australian Shepherd or the Border Collie. Now, granted, they weren't using those dogs for any sort of protection sport. They were just trying to learn how to do this drive building exercise. Do you think it could help raise it, but maybe just not enough to where it's going to be effective? Or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it could help raise it. Is it going to raise it to the point where they can actually do some work or, have fun doing the training? It depends on the dog. I mean, that's when you start getting into like nature versus nurture and,
Of course.
genetics of a dog. And like, it can be very complicated at that point. But I think it can definitely help with like a medium drive dog become a higher drive dog. I definitely don't recommend it for a higher drive dog because you'll make them so psychotic that the obedience is going to be a giant pain. Then they're not out. You have outing issues, and they're not wanting to let go. They're running downfield when they're not supposed to bite the wrong person. Go after the judge. Like you can have all kinds of different issues pop up by just continuing to build and build and build drive on a dog that's already a lunatic.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How do you work with a dog that has those issues? So if I'm working really high drive, let's say German Shepherd, and they can be quite vocal, and I'm trying to get the dog to do a nice heel position, but not a mobile one. We're just sitting there. I want the dog looking up at me, but the dog's anticipating that we're going to start doing this obedience routine or we're going to start doing protection. And the dog's just vocalizing the whole time, whining, yaps, barks. And then if I try to correct it, the dog barks even more. It kind of amps it up. Do you have any good approach for that? Is it really like, okay, this might be a Pavlovian response, and now we have to decondition or counter condition the dog?
Yeah, so with that, again, it can depend on the dog, but sometimes I've given dogs, and people might say that this is inappropriate, but I've given a dog a bite in those situations just to get it out of their system. Like, oh, okay, I finally got it. And then once they get that out of their system, now let's do some obedience and kind of work the dog with the decoy and everything else. And then other dogs, I just start kind of getting on them of like, hey, when I say heel, it's now. And then I have desensitization with the decoy, maybe a further distance away, barely doing anything, then getting closer and closer and closer to the dog and handler team, increasing the pressure, increasing the distractions, and increasing the demand for the obedience, and then giving the dog a reward, whether it's a bite coming from the decoy or from a tug. Typically at that point, food is irrelevant. They're not going to care about food. They want to bite something because they're such a high drive dog. But the same thing can work even with a pet dog that gets overexcited about a pool or getting in the vehicle. And it's like, all right, well, we're going to work around the vehicle. It's going to be 50 yards away. And mom's going to open the door while I'm handling the dog. And then I get closer, 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 and just building more sensation for that, for the dog, no matter what the situation is, whether it's a decoy or whatever.
Yeah. And of course, the timeline's going to vary. It's like you probably get this question because I get it quite often where someone will reach out and they'll say, these are my goals. How long is it going to take me? And it's the same thing as someone coming up to me and saying, oh, I want to be on stage for a bodybuilding competition. It's like, okay, well, what's your diet like? What are your genetics? How much sleep are you getting? What's your stress level? How many reps are you doing? There's way too many variables. So it's like staying consistent and trusting really in the system. I kind of want to go back to the dry building because I'm curious as to how you will get a dog to drop a tug or something in the early stages, what we used to do. And I still use it for many dogs outside of protection to get things out of their mouth in the early stages. Like if I'm taking, let's say, a young puppy on a walk and it picks something up, what I'll do is I'll scoop one arm underneath the dog's belly and I'll bring my other arm across the dog's chest and I lift them up with their back end higher than their front end, and then they just drop whatever's in their mouth. And then I move them off to the side and off we go on the walk. And we would do that during the dry building if the dog or the puppy didn't have an out command yet. We'd pick them up, they drop the item, you kick it out, and then the helper would grab it and go back to working the dog. Do you think that's a good technique, or do you have something that works better?
Yeah, I think that's a great technique for most like pet dogs. For a high drive working dog, I don't think that. Again, it depends on the dog, but a really high
And a
drive
puppy.
working, yeah, they're just not going to care. Um, So typically, what I will do is whether a flat collar or whatever the dog is wearing, obviously not a harness, it's not going to work, but a flat collar, I'll have it up closer to the dog's like ears and right under their chin, and I'll just take them off their front legs. And
Mm,
again, it sounds brutal, but it's not to the dog. I'm just
yeah,
cutting
yeah,
off their wind. When they can't breathe, they can't bite, they'll spit whatever's in their mouth, because whatever's in their mouth could potentially be dangerous. If we're not talking about
right.
like bite work, it could be any number of things. Like I had a client a year and a half ago, their dog swallowed a fishing lure. Like, I mean, that's
Jeez.
just got to be, I don't even know how it got it down, but it was a lot of money to get it out. I'll tell you that. But if you just grab the dog and choke them, which sounds terrible, it's funny because when you were saying this, I was going to describe a whole rear naked choke and fucking pressing my hips in, but I didn't want to go there. So, but just hanging the dog up until they spit it out is normally what I'll do. Again, with a higher drive dog, in the very beginning when they're young at 8 weeks old, I'm going to do that, and you can see
Mm,
when you see it done, it's not brutal. The dogs usually just sit there with their tail and butt wagging and they're happy as
right.
hell.
Yeah.
And they're still holding on to the tug. And then eventually they just spit it out. And then I have the decoy rip it away and tease them up again. Once I get to that point where the dog understands with a little bit of pressure that high on their neck, they're going to spit it out. I start rewarding from a different source. So spit out that tug and then get this tug. So then they're trading one tug for another. And then I don't let the decoy take the tug off, and I just have him freeze with good back pressure so it doesn't bite him in the leg. And I show them another tug that's alive. So they come from the dead tug to the live tug.
Right.
So I'm just working again their prey drive from a dead rabbit to a live rabbit, without using a rabbit.
Yes, yes, and I'm glad you brought that up too. Yeah, that's a technique we would use as well, and it's not just like you said. It sounds worse than it actually is. And when you
Yeah.
said, yeah, they're usually sitting there wagging their tail, I could literally see dogs that we've worked doing exactly what you're saying. They're like happy wagging, and then they let it out, and you go right back into training. It doesn't even phase them. And I'm trying to walk through different like clubs that I trained with to try to see some of the differences. There was other clubs that I trained with where they would spend a lot of time working the dogs on those tables. I don't know what the technical term is for it, but where it has the walls kind of on the side and it would keep the dog in place, and they would use that for targeting very specific areas, like targeting here in the shoulder or the bicep or even the chest. Do you use those, and do you like those if you do?
So no, it's not typically a tool that I use. I do know a lot of trainers that use them for bite development, grip development, even targeting. Um, because my foundation is in ring sport for protection dogs and everything. Obviously, it evolved into like military canine, police canine, protection dogs. Like, and there's different things that I do, but the foundation is going to be ring sport. And everything is so fast paced and moving in ring, that I just don't believe for that it's a good tool to use for those things. I would rather the dog develops it in the middle of working technique for a pivot leg or a lateral or whatever technique I'm teaching the dogs. I'll work their bite development in there as well as their targeting on different things without using the table. For me personally, I'm just not a fan of it, but I know a lot of people use it and they have great success with it. Keep going. Go at it. Not
Right.
me.
Well, I mean, it makes complete sense. It's the same thing with let's use that perch bowl or the pivot bowl, some people call it, where you take a bowl, you flip it upside down, you teach the dog to put their front paws on it, and you could teach them to pivot and move their back end. And I've used it with success. I know other people that have used it with success. But then I've also learned techniques where the foundation is from the spin, where you teach the dog to spin multiple directions. And then when we have the dog in the sit front, they're basically just doing a 180 spin to go into the heel position. And it looks really nice. And they didn't use the bowl. So just to kind of go off what you were saying, it could be a tool that you can use, but you can also do it without. And you've conducted decoy seminars for police and military canine units as well. And in your experience, how does training a protection dog for let's say, real world police or military differ from training for sport competition? Are the principles that apply to both? And what needs to be adjusted when the stakes are real?
Yeah, so I would say one of the major differences between ring sport, especially, and protection for real world, whether it's police, military, or a civilian with a protection dog, is the vocalization of the decoy. So obviously in ring sport, the decoy's not allowed to talk, yell. If they get bit in the hand, they're not allowed to say anything. Like I've literally seen decoys get bit in the stomach under the suit and yell, and the judge went up their butt sideways, like, "Don't, you're not supposed to do that." I'm like, the guy got bit, you know. So
Yeah.
it's like you're not allowed to talk. And obviously, in those other worlds, like you're teaching a dog that it's going to be biting for real, and the people are going to be kicking, screaming, yelling for
Mm.
their mom and clawing at the dog. So that's one of the big differences. Usually, when I'm teaching like police canine and military or even protection dogs, I'm mostly a lot of the times for decoys teaching technique because they tend to do forearm, forearm, forearm. They don't do
Mm.
chest, back of, the back of the suit, like besides the arm, like dead in the middle of the back, the leg bites. They don't get into a lot of that. And a lot of the time somebody's hiding in a bush and the only thing that's sticking out is their leg, or maybe it's something, their stomach is exposed. So teaching those different targeting techniques. And then I do teach like ring technique in with it. So like pivots, laterals, um, both on a fleeing attack and on, somebody that's facing and challenging the dog, as well as on stagnant bites, just different targeting areas, not just always the forearm, which unfortunately a lot of police and military, they're starting to get away from that now. But for years, that's all they did was even bring out a
Mm.
sleeve. And so that's one of the major things that I do. But there's definitely differences between real life training and sport training. One of the analogies I always use is MMA. Cops will go, or military will go learn from an MMA instructor. If they get John Jones to come out and teach them how to defend a takedown or choke somebody out or whatever it is, they'll do it all day long. But then they get a professional dog trainer that tells them how to do that. Like, that's sport. We don't need that. And it's like, if the dog doesn't know that it's sport, the dog knows I'm biting that guy and I need to do A, B, and C in order to get to D. And they kind of process it a lot different than we would. And unfortunately, a lot of those guys will kind of humanize it of like, this is more sport and this is real life. And it's like the dog doesn't know the difference. So this training is training and it's going to help you just in general.
And other steps that you take with the dog that's going to be a real working military or police dog that might be different from the sport dog to try to increase the percentage or the chances that the dog will actually follow through with a real bite if that situation was to come up? Like, are we doing hidden sleeves? Are we doing muzzle bites? Are you doing a lot of those things to try to increase the likelihood of the dog following through? Whereas, and I'll tell you a quick story that a police officer told me. He had a working dog. He was part of the canine unit. And this one guy he took off. He's running away from him. And he said, "You need to stop running or I'm going to send the dog. You need to stop running or I'm going to send the dog." And the guy just kept on running. And the guy was completely naked. So he didn't have anything on at all. And he sent the dog. The dog ran after the guy, got up to him, looked, nothing here, went back to the police officer.
Yeah, I mean, I've even, this is also a story, and then I'll get into what your question was. But I've also decoyed different police canine competitions. One of them here in Arizona, and when I first moved out here, I had a very thin trial suit, and a lot of the police dogs, and these are dogs on the street, ran right past me because my suit was so tight and thin. They went right
Mm.
past me and bit the wrong person, or they would just not bite me at all. A lot of the dogs, obviously, they could care less. They bit me. And but a lot of them, even in that situation, that I'm wearing a bite suit because it's a different shape. It's not the big police ones that a lot of them wear. It was a very slim cut. It was a selective suit, so very tight fitting, and they just ran right past me. So it can kind of happen that way too. For me personally, like muzzle attacks are very important, and doing them in shorts and tank top and teaching some skin on skin. I know some guys do use like that rubber arm or the rubber leg and stick it through a fence and have the dog bite it because it has the same feeling as flesh.
Mm.
But I've seen dogs on different police departments that have gone through all those different things, and their first initial bite is terrible. It's just something that the dog has to get used to. Actually, biting a guy that's kicking, screaming, and rolling around, and trying to get him off the bite, and like feeling all of that, flesh, fabric, blood, everything in their mouth while they're biting somebody for real, as opposed to a bite suit. And then obviously there's dogs that they just don't care. They're going to bite whatever's in front of them.
Right. So there's really no guarantee, but we can do the best that we can with the training to try to ensure the likelihood that if that does come up, the dog's going to be successful. Uh, what do you look for in a dog's temperament when considering them for protection dog training?
So for me personally, I always like to start with a really young dog. Some people do get older dogs. I always don't think to me, it's almost like trying to get into UFC and you're 35 years old. It's probably not going to happen. You want to start when you're really young. So one, I do test young puppies. I want to see confidence is probably number one. You've got to be a confident puppy. And then I want to see the different drives. I want to see prey drive, fight drive, even at a young age. And for me, prey drive is going to be the more important one, because with prey drive, I can form that into other things or use that to my advantage to teach them other things. And then obviously the confidence. If they're afraid of their own shadow, they're going to be a fear biter. They're not going to bite at the right time, or they're not going to bite when they should. I just don't want to deal with that. And that's just genetics. You can have one puppy in a great litter, and that one puppy's just not going to make it. So typically I test them out really young, between 5 to 8 weeks of age, whether I'm taking them at 6 or taking them at 8 weeks. And I'm going to really test a lot of like their bite drive, dealing with the stick, dealing with different noises, even my vocalization, like when they're biting, yelling out, "Hey, good, good," and just kind of getting the dogs to understand that no matter what, you don't let go of this. So I'm definitely looking for high drive and high confidence at a very young age, so that I know I can form that into what I want.
Well said. And great leadership leaves tracks worth following. Can you show my audience where your tracks lead?
For sure. So you can always call me or text me at 602-374-4555. That is my pet dog training business. It's All American Canine. Our website is all-american-k-9.com. And you can email me, text me if you wanted to set up a decoy seminar or learn more about ring sport, or if you're in the Phoenix area and you want to have some good pet dog training, give us a ring.
And do you have any online courses?
We do. So we have a decoy course with Sit, Stay, Learn. I don't have the website in front of me. I'm sure you could plug it in somewhere here. But
Mhm.
Sit, Stay, Learn is a great organization that puts a lot of dog trainers, a lot of high level dog trainers together in these different videos, and we have a great decoy course on that as well.
I knew you had a course on there. I just wanted to bring it up because it is an excellent course, and your reputation is one of the best in the industry. And so, for everybody else, remember to work with your dog, not against them. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Bob. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nate. I was honored to be here. It was a great pleasure. Thank you so much.